So now we get to the meat of today's discussion is AV receivers and their new model features. 12 months ago, we were talking about 8K and 4K 120 and the status of what was going to happen. And these are slides from my talk that we were giving a year ago. In Japan, you could buy a Sharp TV with a Sharp recorder. In preparation for the Olympics, the Japanese were really gearing up for 8K with their BS 8K TV channel, which was transmitting in 8K, unfortunately named. But effectively, this is just four 1080p panels effectively joined together with 4 HDMI cables and a special hard drive recorder that would allow it to tape Japanese digital free-to-air 8K television. It wasn't HDMI 2.1 as indicated by the plethora of cables needed to make it all work. And of course, professional cameras were started to be produced in 8K. And we also talked about what would be coming, HDR10+, invented by Samsung and Panasonic. This variable refresh rate supported by Xbox for gaming, and of course HDCP 2.3. And in the future, we'll have all these features and these other aspects of HDMI 2.1. So it was all off coming up soon for real. And the good news is, basically all of this is now a reality. But where is 8K? Well, there isn't much. There's basically no 8K content for movies and TV shows available right now, and there's little prospect of there being any content in the next 12 months. You can go onto YouTube and watch some handmade 8K 60 frames content. Some movies are being shot now in 8K resolution, but of course they haven't been released on a disc format. There is no player that can play a disc in 8K released by any television or optical disc device manufacturer. So what's the point of 8K? Well, you're future-proofing. If someone's holding back to buy an AVR, don't. We've got a socket on the back that covers you for 2 or 3 years when someone makes an 8K player or an app comes out that will stream 8K content. You're ready to go and switch it through the AVR. And the good news is, guys, when 4K came out, it was released prior to HDCP 2.2 being added onto it. So we had 4K products that would do 4K, but couldn't play a 4K disc because of copy protection. The industry realized that huge mistake and have addressed it immediately from this point forward. So we are ready to go with copy protection that applies to 8K content is here now. That mistake is not being made in the industry this time. So customers can truly buy with confidence that they are buying a future-proof 8K compatible AV receiver. Here is the back panel of the SR8015 up close. Here you can see the 8K references on the back. One input is designated 8K resolution. So this is HDMI 2.1. The rest are HDMI 2.0A. All right, so this is the 2.1. Over here, we have 2 outputs that are HDMI 2.1, and the Zone 2 output is HDMI 2.0A. So this means if you feed it an 8K signal here, you will get a black screen in Zone 2. You would have to feed it a 4K signal through here to watch that same signal come out here in Zone 2. Furthermore, if you wish to reassign this HDMI input to the, say, for example, the game input, because the PlayStation 5 will be 8K, you may want to select the game input on your AVR and have it look at this socket. That is possible. You can reassign it over to here. However, you cannot reassign the game HDMI input to be selected over here. It's a one-way path. You can move this one over here, but because of there's a firewall literally between HDMI 2.0A and 2.1, obviously you can't upgrade a old 4K input to the 8K socket over here. These products that do video conversion, so that's from the 4700 up and the 5015 up, will take a 576i analog video signal in here and output it through these sockets at 8K. They'll convert it all the way up to 8K scaling to send it out to your projector or television. Now, here is a close-up of the menu of a AVCX 6700. It's almost identical to the previous model, except for these 2 headings. 4K, now 8K signal format. It used to say just 4K, and HDCP setup. These are the 2 new changes that have been made here. When you select this option, this window appears. There are 3 settings now, not 2. There used to be standard setting. Now that means I'm using 4K with standard dynamic range signals running at 10 gigabits per second. Now that's what I use, because I don't watch television in pitch black, and I reckon you need to watch high dynamic range in a totally dark room to get the benefits of it. So I just use standard 4K imagery. If you toggle it to enhanced, it's now compatible with 18 gigabits HDMI signals, and that's high dynamic range signals, okay? So that's where you've got massive dynamic range between brights and darks. But now the third new feature, well, the new feature, the third option is 8K enhanced. And as soon as you select that, this little warning, this message pops up, please use ultra high speed 48 gigabits HDMI cables for 8K. Now this is I think it's a bit of a change. We've been able to get away with vagaries of HDMI cables for quite some time as resolutions have got higher and higher. As long as your cable was well made enough, thick enough, and short enough, you could almost get it to do anything. With 8K, a passive cable made of copper will do 2 to 3 meters maximum. So this message is of quality is now really important, and cables will be certified with this logo, including Bluestream cables will be wearing this logo. When you do select 8K enhanced, your TV, I have 2 televisions here, both of them aren't 8K. You do get a little message popping up saying your TVs aren't compatible, why are you doing this? So just don't bother. So it does warn you that you're about to set it into a mode that your TV can't support. Now, I looked into it and found out that Sony apparently are going to start shipping their PS5 around about November 14 to 20 this year, and Xbox around about November or late in 2020. So they're obviously they want to start doing business for Christmas this year. I've also looked into content. Sony are saying the PlayStation 5 is 8K. However, it's only 8K if someone makes an 8K video game. Otherwise, it's not 8K. Apparently, the PS4 Pro only has about 6 games that are 4K at 60 frames per second. Only about 6. So they have to get content. Someone has to make a game running at 4K 120 for the PlayStation 5 to provide that benefit that feeds through our AVR to the 8K or 4K 120 television. It's all about content. So the first content we see that's compatible with the 8K socket will be Sony and Microsoft players, but it certainly won't be movies, and it might be not very many games either. Japan could not find a Blu-ray player or a format being stated by any TV manufacturer about for movie playback use at all. The other change in the menu setting was HDCP. Now, this was a feature that used to be part of the diagnostics menu. So feedback from the market said, this feature is really useful. Get it out of the diagnostics menu and put it in the proper menu so we can access it more easily. Now, this is where you want to stabilize your system. You've got a long cable running up to the projector, and you want to lock it into HDCP version 1.4 to make it run reliably at 1080p. That's the easy way to do it, is to dive into the input and lock the HDCP into the old version of copy protection. So these are just examples I did where I toggled a couple and left the rest on factory setting, which is auto. So that's just made it easier to access within the menu system. Installers, I think, will enjoy that new feature. And I'm not going to talk in great detail about this because most of this stuff, this is all the catch-up features for HDMI 2.1 for video. Variable refresh rate, quick media switching, quick frame transport. Two of these 3 features are focused mainly on gaming and a bit of virtual reality sort of stuff. Anything where the frames on the display have to change really quickly, these technologies will benefit from that. But I'll show you something in a minute in the AVR that really helps customers and you guys know whether that technology is available to be used or not. It's quite well designed, this. What I will want to comment on is something I've learned only recently. When I got all this information, the spreadsheets were saying there's HDR10 Plus. Now that's the Samsung invented that standard for high dynamic range. The plus means it's very dynamic. And then there's this dynamic HDR. So I emailed the support team at Sound United and said, hey, dude, that's the same thing. What's going on? And I got the answer, and I'm sharing this with you because you need to know. And now you can look like experts talking to your dealers if they ask you about this. They're not the same thing. HDR10 Plus was invented by Samsung and a couple of other companies, and that is the dynamic version of high dynamic range of HDR10. So there's HDR10, which is static dynamic range, a static high dynamic range, and then Plus is variable. Frame by frame, it adjusts accordingly depending on what's required for that particular frame. But the HDMI organization decided they wanted to have their own standard as well, and that's called dynamic HDR, and that's part of the HDMI 2.1 specification. All right, so they are different, but they are trying to achieve the same thing. They are not the same technology renamed, they are separate things. Just another thing that we do support. So you could argue this is a future-proofing thing. If a disc comes out with dynamic HDR on it, we are good to pass that signal through the AVR into the television. In fact, I think my next screen is, this is a list as of yesterday or 2 days ago of all the HDR10 Plus 4K discs released into the marketplace. There's not very many, but at least there is content. And remember, these are not region coded. So you can buy these online from the US and they will play perfectly in players bought in retail stores in Australia. Little reminder here for you. These are technologies that are officially supported in HDMI 2.1, auto low latency mode and ARC. 2 years ago, Sound United added firmware that added those two technologies all the way back to models released 6 years ago. Flagships, but it was. So the chipsets were simply so good that they could handle those two technologies, even though it was HDMI version 2.0. So basically they were not certified, but now they are certified. The products we're shipping now will be certified to do these technologies. Little reminder there for you. Another new feature that's in the top 3 models of both brands, the 37, 47, 67, and the 60, 70, and 80, 15, is this new preamp mode. Now we've had preamp mode a few times, well, in a few models going back, where you want to use power amplifiers on the front of your system and reassign those internal amps to run effect speakers. Those features are still inside the product. They haven't removed them at all, but they've added in the speaker ampersand option this special new heading called preamplifier, and the word pre appears on every speaker. Now this is an all or nothing system. You can't just use half the system in this special mode. It's got to be every speaker. It completely deactivates the onboard amplifiers. When you select this heading here, you then drill in. Maybe you don't have 11 speakers in your system. I've only got 7. Well, that's where you answer these questions here. No, I've only got 5 speakers, not 7. No, I've only got 2 Dolby Atmos speakers, not 6. And when you answer these questions, this picture rolls backwards to match the system that you've actually got in your home for preamping, okay? So the technical benefit of preamping, I don't actually quite understand this. I wish Bosco was here. There is more tolerance in clipping levels when you activate this mode. This isn't available, so it's not as pure a preamp mode in the previous models as it is in this one. When you select it, you can choose view terminal config, and when you do, of course, only the RCA sockets are lit up on this example. All the speaker terminals are grayed out because, as I say, it's an all or nothing. It's complete preamp mode or not. And a side benefit of this is it uses much less power, will run much cooler, and it's effectively like turning on eco mode permanently because all those hot amplifiers are now external that you would be using. And another new feature is dual speaker preset memory. This is apparently proving to be popular overseas markets, where an example of this is quite straightforward. You have a television and you have floor to ceiling glass windows, and it's the daytime, the curtains are pulled back, the TV is on. You can run Odyssey and sample the acoustics and store them in the AVR as preset number 1. Then you can lower your projector screen, close your curtains, maybe get the family in and put them on the couch, I don't know, and then re-EQ the whole system for those acoustic properties, which would be a bit more damp and a bit more deadened by the extra fabric, and then save that as preset 2. And then you can just access those with the push of a button. So it's a feature that was part of the Odyssey app, sort of, effectively. They've simply made it available to everybody within the menu without having to buy the app, or you could even use it by storing it inside a USB stick and putting it in the front. That's all messing about too much. This is a new video signal information screen. So you're watching a movie on your home theater, you grab the remote and press the information button. And this little window pops up telling you the source you're on, the sound mode, the signal that's coming in, the Odyssey setting you're running, how many channels are coming in and how many channels are coming out, your volume and your eco mode. But if you press the information button again, you now get a video input and output screen, which shows you what's coming into your AV receiver and what's going out. And now, here's the helpful little handy information Sound United have included. ALLM, QMIS, and QFT. Your AVR will tell you that your source device and your television and your AVR are compatible with these technologies, and you can run them in the source device or not. It's up to you. So this is a little flag saying auto low latency mode is available. If you turn it on in your Xbox, it'll activate and go through to your television. If your TV doesn't have it and your AVR does and your Xbox does, it won't be there because your TV doesn't have it. So it's a little good way of knowing what modern HDMI 2.1 technologies are available to you and the user. You can see here the frame rate, 24 frames, 8K resolution, dynamic HDR, color space is listed, the pixel bit depth is listed. This is a screenshot I got from Japan, obviously, not in my lounge room. So it's a really good way to check and see what's happening for the video signal that you're watching. A couple more little things that have been added. I thought that burn-in on television screens was a thing of the past. I thought that was a thing that plasmas suffered from years ago, and I thought that was all in the past. Turns out OLED screens suffer from burn-in as well. I don't sell televisions and I didn't know that. They've added a screensaver function that if the AVR is left for 5 minutes not doing anything with the menu showing or no input, or maybe the tuner is showing or HEOS content or Bluetooth content is showing, the Denon logo will now jump around the screen, and the mute symbol, if you've got that muted, will now move around the screen in a screensaver mode to save OLED screens. But this doesn't exist yet. This will be released in update 25 in December this year, is their plan to add this feature in. And lastly is incremental volume limiter. Now previously you could only set your maximum volume to 3 settings, 60, 70 or 80. So the feedback from the market was, no, I want to set it at reference level every time, which is 87. So Sound United have added 100 step increments. So if you want to choose 32 or 64 or whatever, you can now precisely set the volume limit to one of 100 positions, either in the 0 to 98 scale or the minus decibel scale. So that's a new feature that's all about movie enthusiasts wanting to run their movies at reference level. So they're accommodating for that feature. Here is my AVCX 6700 case study. Here's my 65-inch TV, and there's the 6700 with my source devices sitting in there just after I'd hooked it all up and got it running. Here are my inputs that I've left active. The 3 HDMI sources are Fetch TV, a 4K Sony Blu-ray player, and my 4th generation Apple TV. And before I even had time to punch up this screenshot, it had already automatically renamed all of those 3 sources from the players. I did nothing. I don't know why Fetch TV got renamed Fetch TV Lounge. That just is how it happened. I don't know what's going on there, but I'm happy. I don't care. I've got a PlayStation 2, don't laugh, connected via component, and a Toshiba DVD player connected via component. I renamed those manually by hand, of course. I also locked my input modes into the technology audio that's they're using, and I firmly believe picture and sound loads a little bit faster. When you're changing inputs, I get sound and picture quicker than if that was left hunting on automatic. So I put in a 4K Blu-ray disc into my 4K Blu-ray player, and I pressed the video input button twice, and I liked what I saw. 4K running at 24 frames, input and output. The color space depth is 422, 12 bits in, 12 bits out. Love it. That's kind of what I expected. and it was just good to be able to reaffirm it. I then moved on to my Apple TV and loaded up a little bit of Star Trek Discovery, and discovered, to my surprise, that it was running at 4K 50 frames, 4K 50, with a different color space depth, which I think is technically not as good as what the Blu-ray player was running at, and it's only running at 8 bits, whereas this is running at 12.